The United Earth Defense Council chamber buzzed with panic, which wasn't unusual these days. What was unusual was that Admiral Chen had somehow managed to break his third stress ball of the morning, leaving little rubber pieces scattered across the polished mahogany table. "Let me get this straight," he said, pinching the bridge of his nose. "The Khazar-Thax Empire, the most militant species in the known galaxy, has challenged humanity to single combat." General Martinez nodded, her holographic projection flickering slightly. "That's correct, sir. Their champion, General Vexathor, has never lost a battle in 3 centuries. He's reportedly killed 247 opponents in ritual combat alone." "Wonderful," muttered Admiral Chen. "And if we refuse?" "Then they declare our species cowardly and unworthy of diplomatic relations," Director Watson chimed in, her British accent clipped with tension, "which, according to their customs, gives them the right to, well, annihilate us." The chamber erupted in overlapping voices. Someone suggested sending their top special forces operative. Another mentioned their Olympic champion. A third voice recommended their most decorated soldier. "None of them will work," Martinez cut in. "The Khazar-Thax value unpredictability in combat above all else. They've studied all our conventional warriors. They know every Earth military tactic, every fighting style, every—" A tremendous crash interrupted her as the chamber's reinforced doors burst open. Through them rolled, no, skateboarded, a figure in a non-regulation United Earth Defense uniform that appeared to be covered in glitter and what looked suspiciously like hot sauce stains. Lieutenant Elena Chaos Rodriguez came to a perfect stop in the middle of the chamber, kicked up her skateboard, and caught it with one hand. Her other hand clutched a half-eaten burrito. "Yo," she said, taking a bite. "I heard you guys needed someone unpredictable." Admiral Chen's face went through several interesting color changes. "Lieutenant Rodriguez, this is a closed session of the highest security clearance. How did you even—" "Oh, that." She waved her burrito dismissively. "I convinced the AI security system we were dating and then broke up with it. It's crying in the mainframe right now. Should be back to normal in an hour or 2. Director Watson's jaw dropped. "You emotionally manipulated our AI?" "Technically, I taught it to love and then crushed its digital heart. But yeah, same difference." Elena finished her burrito and pulled out a rubber chicken from somewhere in her uniform. "So, about this alien fight thing." Martinez's hologram leaned forward. "How do you even know about—" "The janitor told me," Elena shrugged. "Well, technically I taught him to communicate through interpretive dance, and he expressed it through a very moving performance involving a mop and 3 paper clips." Admiral Chen slumped in his chair. "Lieutenant Rodriguez, your methods are—" "Effective," she suggested. "I was going to say clinically insane." "Same thing." Elena grinned, a slightly maniacal gleam in her eyes. "And that's exactly why you need me. These Khazar whatevers want unpredictable. I once won a firefight using nothing but a tube sock filled with marshmallows and a recording of my grandma's telenovela." The room fell silent. Everyone present knew about the infamous sock incident. It had since been classified as top secret, not because it was sensitive information, but because no one could explain how it had actually worked. Admiral Chen looked at the rubber chicken, then at Elena's glitter-covered uniform, then at the skateboard tucked under her arm. Finally, he looked at the holographic display showing the fearsome General Vexathor, a 9-foot-tall warrior whose armor was decorated with the bones of his fallen enemies. "May whatever gods exist help us," he muttered. "Lieutenant Rodriguez, how would you like to represent humanity in ritual combat?" Elena's grin widened to proportions that shouldn't have been physically possible. "Cool beans. But first, I'm going to need 3 things. My pet hamster Mr. Snuggles, 47 pounds of silly string, and permission to modify my combat suit's audio system to play nothing but polka music." The council members exchanged glances. They had just handed humanity's fate to their craziest operative. Somewhere in the vast expanse of space, the universe chuckled. The Khazar-Thax Empire had no idea what they were about to face. "You can't be serious about the hamster," Admiral Chen said, watching Elena unpack what appeared to be a tiny combat vest sized for a rodent. "Mr. Snuggles has a higher security clearance than you do," Elena replied, not looking up from her work. She pulled out a miniature helmet with Chaos Squad painted on it in neon pink. Besides, he's my tactical advisor. Martinez's hologram flickered as she paced. Lieutenant, this isn't one of your regular missions. This is General Vexathor we're talking about. Perhaps I should remind you of his achievements. You mean like the time he conquered the Pleiades system? Elena interrupted, now fitting the tiny vest on an extremely content-looking hamster. Or when he single-handedly defeated the drone armada of Beetlejuice? Yeah, I read his file. Mr. Snuggles wasn't impressed. The hamster squeaked in what could only be described as judgmental agreement. Director Watson pulled up footage of Vexathor's previous battles. The massive alien warrior moved with terrifying precision, his forearms wielding different weapons with deadly grace. This is what you'll be facing, Lieutenant. He's never lost a fight. 300 years undefeated. Blah, blah, blah. Elena waved dismissively while feeding Mr. Snuggles a sunflower seed. You know what else he's never faced? This. She pulled out her phone and showed them a video. The council members leaned in, expecting some secret weapon or combat technique. Instead, they saw Elena riding what appeared to be a nuclear missile, rodeo style, through an asteroid field while playing Cotton Eye Joe on a kazoo. That was classified footage, Admiral Chen sputtered. From the Centauri incident. Oh yeah, good times, Elena nodded. The missile was actually pretty chill once I taught it to appreciate vintage Earth country music. We still exchange Christmas cards. Director Watson blinked rapidly. You exchange holiday cards with a missile. Well, technically with its AI guidance system. It's retired now, living peacefully as a lawn ornament on Mars. Elena started unpacking more equipment, including what looked like disco balls and several cans of spray cheese. The point is, Vexathor might be undefeated, but he's also predictable. Every move calculated, every strategy based on thousands of years of combat doctrine. She stood up, Mr. Snuggles taking his position on her shoulder, tiny helmet gleaming under the chamber lights. But you know what no amount of combat experience prepares you for. Someone crazy enough to convert their quantum-enhanced battlesuit into a mobile disco unit that plays nothing but polka remixes of heavy metal songs. As if on cue, Mr. Snuggles pulled out a tiny pair of sunglasses and put them on. Martinez's hologram looked pained. Lieutenant, there are thousands of documented instances of Kazarthak's combat techniques. Their warriors train from birth in 17 different forms of... Yeah, and I once defeated a security system with a rubber chicken and 3 tubes of lip gloss, Eleanor interrupted. Want to know how? Not particularly, Admiral Chen muttered. Too bad, it's a great story. See, the trick was in the flavour of the lip gloss. Strawberry confuses AIs. Don't ask me why, it's just one of those universal constants. Like how all alien species somehow invented dubstep independently. She began packing her gear, which now included a beach ball, several party horns, and what appeared to be a complete mariachi band costume. The combat's in 2 days, right? Perfect. That gives me just enough time to teach Mr. Snuggles the choreography. The hamster squeaked and did a tiny salute. Choreography? Watson asked, immediately regretting the question. Oh yeah. If we're going to save humanity, we're doing it with style, and possibly interpretive dance. Elena grinned. Now, does anyone know where I can find 47 rubber ducks and a trombone by tomorrow morning? The council members watched in horror as their chosen champion skateboarded out of the chamber, her combat-ready hamster bobbing its helmeted head to whatever was playing through its tiny headphones. Should we inform the Kazarthaks about... Martinez gestured vaguely at the glitter-covered path Elena had left behind. Admiral Chen slumped in his chair. No, let them discover that particular horror on their own. As if to punctuate his words, a distant explosion followed by maniacal laughter echoed through the halls, accompanied by what sounded suspiciously like polka music. May whatever gods exist have mercy on us all, Watson whispered, because Elena Rodriguez certainly won't have any on them. Mr. Snuggles's tiny battle cry of agreement echoed through the corridors. The United Earth Defense Training Facility had seen many strange sights over the years, but nothing quite like this. The observation deck was packed with military officials, 3 alien observers from the Xarthax Empire, and 1 increasingly distressed military psychologist. "Is this normal human combat preparation?" asked Zexnar, the lead Xarthax observer, his 4 eyes blinking in confusion as he watched Elena teaching Mr. Snuggles to salsa dance on a miniature dance floor. "Absolutely not," muttered Dr. Rivera, the psychologist, furiously scribbling notes. "Nothing about Lieutenant Rodriguez has ever been normal." Below, Elena had set up what she called her Victory Achievement Center, though it looked more like a carnival had exploded inside a military gym. Disco balls hung from the ceiling, silly string covered half the combat dummies, and a bubble machine was filling the air with iridescent spheres. 5, 6, 7, 8, Elena called out, demonstrating a spin move for Mr. Snuggles. "Remember, buddy, the key to defeating a 4-armed warrior is to make him question his own reality." The hamster executed a perfect pirouette in his combat vest. "Magnificent!" Elena tossed him a sunflower seed. "Now let's work on your battle cry." One of the Xarthax observers, Vixatel, leaned toward Dr. Rivera. "We have studied all Earth combat techniques. This is not in our database." "That's because it's not a combat technique," Dr. Rivera sighed. "She's teaching a hamster to dance while playing Don't Stop Believin' in reverse through a kazoo." "And this will help defeat General Vexathor?" asked the third observer, Kexipar, mandibles clicking in confusion. As if answering the question, Elena suddenly launched into action. She activated her modified combat suit, which immediately began pulsing with multicolored lights. Mr. Snuggles leaped onto her shoulder, tiny helmet gleaming. "Combat Simulation Alpha Chaos Tango begin!" she shouted. What followed was either the most brilliant or most insane display of combat skills the facility had ever witnessed. Elena moved through the training course like a tornado of controlled chaos. She deflected laser fire with a reflective party balloon, disabled security turrets by making them malfunction with strategically thrown confetti, and somehow managed to reprogram a combat drone by making it learn the Macarena. "Notice how the enemy can't predict your moves if you don't know what you're doing yourself," she called out to Mr. Snuggles, who was now operating a tiny remote control to guide rubber ducks through the obstacle course. "This defies all known laws of combat," Zexnar whispered in horror. "That's her specialty," Dr. Rivera nodded. "Last month, she prevented an interstellar war by challenging both sides to a game of musical chairs. Nobody knows how she did it, but now those species have a peace treaty and a shared national holiday called the Day of the Chair." Elena had moved on to what she called psychological warfare training. She stood before a hologram of General Vexthor, telling it dad jokes. "Why don't aliens like Tuesday?" she asked the hologram. "Because they're too busy saying, 'Take me to your leader.'" Mr. Snuggles hit a tiny drum for the rim shot. The hologram, programmed to respond like the real Vexathor, looked increasingly confused. "This is not proper combat protocol." "Hi, not proper combat protocol, I'm Elena," she interrupted with finger guns. The hologram actually glitched. "Fascinating," Kexipar muttered, taking notes. "The human appears to be weaponizing what you call cringe." Down in the training area, Elena had moved on to the next phase. She was now teaching a group of combat droids to perform a synchronized swimming routine on dry land, while Mr. Snuggles conducted them with a tiny baton. "The key to victory," she announced to no one in particular, "is to make your enemy so confused that they start questioning every life decision that led them to this moment." Dr. Rivera watched as the Xarthax observers struggled to process what they were seeing. One of them was attempting to calculate the combat effectiveness of synchronized robot dancing. Another had begun stress-eating from a bag of Earth potato chips. The third was quietly humming Don't Stop Believin' without realizing it. Should we warn General Vexathor?" Vixatel asked nervously. "Would it make a difference?" Dr. Rivera replied, watching Eleanor teach Mr. Snuggles how to juggle tiny smoke bombs. "How do you prepare for someone who turns combat into performance art?" At that moment, Elena looked up at the observation deck and grinned. She pressed a button on her suit, and suddenly the entire training facility erupted into a choreographed light show while Never Gonna Give You Up played in 7 different languages simultaneously. Did she just rickroll an entire military facility? Zexnar asked in disbelief. Welcome to Earth, Dr. Rivera said, closing his notebook, where our strongest warrior isn't the one who fights best, but the one who makes the enemy forget they're even in a fight. Mr. Snuggles squeaked in agreement, did a backflip, and threw a tiny glitter bomb that somehow formed a perfect smiley face on the ceiling. The combat wasn't for another day, but somehow, watching Elena conduct her Chaos Orchestra, everyone had a feeling that General Vexithor's undefeated streak was about to meet its most peculiar end. The neutral zone arena on Europa was packed with representatives from over 3,000 species. The massive dome structure, usually used for interstellar peace treaties, had been converted into a combat arena for this historic duel. The stakes were simple. Humanity's standing in the galactic community rested on the outcome of this single combat. General Vexithor's entrance was exactly what you'd expect from an undefeated warrior of the Kazathax Empire. He strode in wearing ceremonial battle armor adorned with trophies from his victories, all 4 arms carrying legendary weapons. The crowd roared, some in admiration, others in terror. Where is the human champion? Vexithor's voice boomed through the arena. Let us begin this ritual combat with honor and... The arena's speaker system suddenly crackled to life, and the opening notes of YMCA started playing. Sorry I'm late, Elena's voice echoed through the stadium. Had to teach the parking AI how to moonwalk. You wouldn't believe how hard it is to parallel park when your computer is trying to perfect its dance moves. The massive doors at the other end of the arena slowly opened, revealing absolutely nothing. The crowd murmured in confusion. Vexithor gripped his weapons tighter, scanning for tricks. Then someone tapped him on the shoulder. The mighty general spun around to find Elena standing behind him, casually eating a popsicle. Mr. Snuggles sat on her shoulder, tiny sunglasses gleaming under the arena lights. How did you... Vexithor started. Oh, I came in through the gift shop, Eleanor shrugged. By the way, your action figures are on sale. I bought one for Mr. Snuggles to use as a practice dummy. Hope you don't mind. I added a tutu to it. In the diplomatic observation box, Admiral Chen buried his face in his hands. We're doomed. Actually, Director Watson whispered, I think that's the fastest I've ever seen anyone throw off Vexithor's ceremonial entrance. Look at his lower right arm. He's already gripping his sword too tight. Down in the arena, Eleanor was now leading an impromptu dance lesson. Come on, everyone, she called out to the crowd. The Macarena is an ancient Earth war dance. You move your arms like this. Yes, even you with the tentacles, you're doing great. Thousands of aliens who had come to witness a legendary duel found themselves inadvertently learning Earth dance moves. Even some of the Kazathax diplomats were swaying slightly. This is not proper combat protocol, Vexithor roared, all 4 arms raised in frustration. That's what the parking AI said too, Elena nodded sympathetically. But look at it now. The arena's massive view screen suddenly showed the parking facility outside, where the AI-controlled guidance systems were indeed performing a perfectly synchronized moonwalk routine with the parking barriers. Lieutenant Rodriguez, the combat referee, a neutral AI, interrupted. The ceremonial combat has specific rules and... Oh my gosh, are you single? Elena gasped. Because I just broke up with the security AI back on Earth, and you have such a lovely voice processing unit. The referee's hologram actually blushed. Several diplomats fainted. The human is making a mockery of sacred combat traditions, one of the Kazathax observers protested. No, General Martinez mused, watching Elena teach Mr. Snuggles how to bow to the crowd. She's making everyone forget they came here to watch a fight to the death. Indeed, the atmosphere in the arena had shifted. Species that had been betting on bloody combat outcomes were now exchanging notes on dance moves. A group of tentacled aliens had started a wave. Someone had even released party balloons. Vexithor stood in the middle of it all, his carefully planned entrance and intimidation tactics completely derailed by a human with a popsicle and a hamster in combat gear. When I defeat you, he growled at Elena. "Your species will learn the price of disrespect." Elena finished her popsicle and handed the stick to Mr. Snuggles, who immediately began using it as a tiny martial arts staff. "That's funny," she grinned, "because when I win, your species is going to learn the electric slide. I already taught the basics to your observers. They're pretty good, actually. Especially Zexnar, who knew 4 legs were perfect for disco." The mighty general turned to the diplomatic box, where to his horror he saw several high-ranking Kazarthax officials discreetly practicing dance steps. "This ends now," he roared, raising his ancient battle-axe. "You're right," Elena nodded, finally taking a combat stance. Mr. Snuggles buckled his tiny helmet. "By the way, does anyone else hear boss music?" The arena lights dimmed, a disco ball lowered from somewhere, and the opening notes of Final Countdown began to play, in polka style. The galaxy's most irregular duel was about to begin, and only one person seemed to know the actual rules. Unfortunately for General Vexathor, it wasn't him. "As per ancient tradition," the referee AI announced, still blushing slightly whenever it looked at Eleanor, "the challenged party may choose the opening ritual." Vexathor raised his ceremonial battle-axe. "I choose the ritual of 17 honorable—" "Dance off," Elena interrupted, already doing the robot. "Earth ritual combat always starts with a dance-off. Mr. Snuggles, drop that beat." The hamster pulled out a tiny DJ controller from his combat vest and pressed a button. The arena filled with an unholy remix of classical Mozart and dubstep. "This is not proper combat," Vexathor roared, all 4 arms clenched in fury. "Everything's proper combat if you're brave enough," Elena replied, smoothly transitioning into the worm. "Come on, big guy. Show me what those 4 arms can do. Jazz hands, jazz hands." In the diplomatic box, Admiral Chen was questioning every life decision that had led to this moment. "She's going to get herself killed." "Actually," Martinez observed, "look at his stance. She's already disrupted his combat rhythm 3 times. He's overextending his right arms, trying to maintain traditional pose while dealing with whatever this is." Down in the arena, Vexathor had finally lost patience. He charged forward with his battle-axe, a move that had ended 97 previous duels in the first strike. Eleanor responded by pulling out a rubber chicken. The mighty general's charge faltered slightly. "What manner of weapon is—" "Squeak!" The rubber chicken's noise echoed through the arena, startling not just Vexathor but half the audience. Eleanor used this moment of confusion to slide between his legs, pop up behind him, and stick a kick-me sign on his back. "You dare!" He spun around, swinging all 4 weapons in a deadly arc. "I dare, I double dare, and I triple dog dare," Eleanor sang back, dancing away from his attacks while somehow managing to tie party balloons to his armor. "By the way, has anyone ever told you that you look like my Aunt Consuela when you're angry? She makes great tamales." The random comment made Vexathor pause. "What are tamales?" "Oh man, you've never had tamales. That's it, we need to fix this right now." Eleanor pulled out her phone. "Hey, Earth? Yeah, we're going to need about 1,000 tamales delivered to Europa." "What?" "No, this can't wait until after the death match." "Yes, I'll hold." Vexthor's legendary combat computer, built into his armor and containing millennia of battle data, was starting to smoke, trying to analyze Elena's fighting style. "Your tactics make no sense," he bellowed, launching into a complex weapon kata that had decimated entire armies. "That's where you're wrong," Elena replied, countering his moves with what appeared to be a combination of interpretive dance and drunken kung fu. "They make all the sense. They make so much sense that they loop back around to nonsense and then come back to sense again. It's like a sense sandwich with nonsense bread." Mr. Snuggles, still DJing, switched the music to polka metal remix of Eye of the Tiger. In the diplomatic box, the alien observers were losing their minds trying to document what they were seeing. One of them had started writing in crayon because their digital pad couldn't process Elena's movements. Is she fighting or dancing?" Watson asked, squinting at the display. "Yes," Martinez replied simply. Indeed, Elena's movements seemed to exist in a quantum state between combat and choreography. Every time Vexathor launched a calculated attack, she responded with something that shouldn't have worked, but somehow did. She deflected a plasma blade with her rubber chicken, used silly string to tangle his lower arms, and at one point appeared to confuse his armor's targeting system by explaining the plot of telenovelas. And then Maria discovers that Jorge is actually her long-lost brother's clone's dentist, she exclaimed, ducking under a sword swing. "This makes no sense," Vexithor shouted, his armor's combat computer now displaying an error message in 17 languages. "I know, right? The dentist part is totally unrealistic. Everyone knows clones prefer orthodontists." The general's next attack was interrupted by Mr. Snuggles launching a perfectly timed barrage of tiny confetti bombs. The glitter got into Vexithor's armor joints, making his movements sparkle fabulously. "You're coming at this all wrong, big guy," Elena said, now somehow perched on his shoulder. "You're fighting like it's combat, but really this is just aggressive performance art with occasional violence." "Combat is serious." Vexithor swung at her, but she backflipped away, landing in a pose that would have made Olympic gymnasts jealous. "Who says serious can't be fun? Mr. Snuggles, show him the thing." The hamster pulled out a tiny whiteboard and began solving complex quantum equations while doing a handstand. The sight of a rodent in combat gear explaining theoretical physics through interpretive dance was too much for Vexithor's combat computer. It started playing La Cucaracha through his armor's speakers. "See?" Elena grinned, now conducting an impromptu physics lesson using her rubber chicken as a pointer. "Even your armor gets it. Now who's ready to learn about quantum entanglement through interpretive dance?" The mighty general of the Xarthax Empire, undefeated for 3 centuries, found himself facing an opponent who had turned the sacred art of combat into a combination of dance recital, physics lecture, and performance art. And somehow, impossibly, he was losing. The worst part? He was starting to enjoy the music. An hour into what was supposed to be a traditional death match, the arena had transformed into something between a physics symposium, a dance party, and an experimental theatre production. Vexithor's legendary armor was now covered in stickers, glitter, and what appeared to be motivational quotes written in neon paint. "And that's why quantum tunneling is basically just atomic crowd surfing," Elena concluded her latest lecture, dodging another series of strikes while using her rubber chicken to draw diagrams in the air. "Stop teaching physics." Vexithor punctuated each word with a weapon swing, his combat computer now playing a mix of mariachi music and heavy metal. "Never. Education is important." Elena launched into a backflip, landing next to Mr. Snuggles' DJ booth. Pop quiz. If a hamster in a combat suit throws tiny smoke bombs at a velocity of 30 meters per second, what's the optimal trajectory for maximum chaos? "That's not a real combat scenario," Vexithor roared. "Wrong answer," Elena grinned. "Mr. Snuggles, demonstrate." The hamster, who had apparently been calculating trajectories this entire time, launched a barrage of tiny smoke bombs. Each one hit a specific point in the arena, creating a pattern that, when viewed from above, formed a perfect smiley face. In the diplomatic box, the alien observers had given up on traditional combat analysis. One was writing poetry about chaos theory. Another had started a spreadsheet tracking the number of physics puns Elena worked into her combat moves, and the third was attempting to teach their fellow diplomats the electric slide. "I'm starting to see it," Martinez said suddenly, leaning forward. "Look at the pattern of her movements over the last hour." Admiral Chen squinted at the tactical display. "What pattern? She's just been bouncing around like a caffeinated kangaroo." "No, she's been setting up the arena. Every seemingly random move, every silly distraction. She's been placing things exactly where she needs them." Watson's eyes widened. "You mean everything up until now has been preparation?" Martinez nodded. "The real fight is about to begin." Down in the arena, Elena had started what she called her grand finale symphony of chaos. "Hey, Vexithor!" she called out, cartwheeling away from his increasingly frustrated attacks. "Did you know that if you play every Earth pop song from the last century simultaneously, it actually forms a perfect harmonic resonance with most combat armor systems?" "That's not possible," he growled, but there was a note of uncertainty in his voice. "Want to bet? Mr. Snuggles, hit it." The hamster, who had somehow acquired a tiny conductor's baton, gave a dramatic wave. Suddenly, every speaker in the arena began playing different songs. The chaos should have been unbearable, but somehow, impossibly, they all synchronized into a coherent wave of sound that made Vexithor's armor vibrate. "What? What is this?" He stumbled, his weapons system starting to glitch. "This, my sparkly friend, is what happens when you apply chaos theory to musical warfare," Elena declared, now conducting the cacophony alongside Mr. Snuggles. "Did you really think all those physics lectures were just to annoy you? Everything has a frequency, even that fancy armor of yours." The General's eyes widened as realization dawned. "You've been calculating resonance frequencies this entire time." "Technically, Mr. Snuggles did the math. I just provided the interpretive dance demonstrations." The hamster squeaked proudly, showing a tiny whiteboard covered in complex equations. Around the arena, all the seemingly random items Elena had scattered throughout the fight began to vibrate in harmony. The silly string formed wave patterns. The glitter swirled in precise mathematical sequences, and even the rubber chicken began to hum at exactly the right frequency. "You see," Elena explained, now perched on top of her fully constructed chaos machine, "combat isn't just about strength or skill. Sometimes it's about understanding that the universe is basically one big dance party waiting to happen. And your armor, it's about to join the conga line." Vexithor looked down in horror as his legendary battle armor, passed down through generations of warriors, began to move on its own. What's happening?" "Physics is happening," Elena declared joyfully, "or as I like to call it, the universe's way of teaching us that everything is connected through the power of dance. The mighty general of the Kazarthax Empire, undefeated for 3 centuries, found himself doing the Macarena against his will. And somewhere in the cosmic dance of probability, the universe itself seemed to laugh. The turning point wasn't just in the battle anymore. It was in the way 3,000 species watched a hamster conduct an orchestra of chaos, while the galaxy's most feared warrior performed involuntary dance moves in glitter-covered armor. Reality, it seemed, had finally caught up with Elena's particular brand of insanity, and she was just getting started. The arena had become what Eleanor proudly called her symphony of synchronized shenanigans. Every piece of apparent randomness from the past hour had transformed into part of the most elaborate Rube Goldberg machine the galaxy had ever witnessed. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of indeterminate existence," Eleanor announced, standing atop her chaos creation, while Mr. Snuggles conducted the universe's most improbable orchestra. "Welcome to the grand finale." Vexithor, still trapped in his Macarena-performing armor, roared in frustration. "This is not how combat works." "That's where you're wrong, buddy." Eleanor grinned, pulling out a single red thread from her pocket. "See, while you were busy being all serious and warrior-like, I turned this entire arena into one giant demonstration of the butterfly effect. Mr. Snuggles, would you do the honors?" The hamster, now wearing a tiny tuxedo over his combat vest, saluted and pulled the thread. What followed was either the most brilliant or most insane chain reaction in military history. The thread triggered a series of dominoes made of rubber chickens, which fell in a perfect spiral pattern. This launched hundreds of party balloons that had been strategically placed earlier, each carrying a small amount of the glitter that had been driving Vexithor crazy. "Impossible," the general gasped, watching as the glitter formed complex geometric patterns in the air. "Improbable," Eleanor corrected, now doing a victory dance on top of her creation. But that's the thing about probability. It's all about perspective. For instance, what are the odds that all that silly string I sprayed earlier would land in a pattern that perfectly matches the resonance frequency of your armor's power core? Vexithor's eyes widened as he noticed the silly string beginning to glow. Or, Eleanor continued, as Mr. Snuggles began the next movement of his Chaos Symphony, what are the chances that every dad joke I told during our fight was actually a coded sequence to reprogram your combat computer? The general's armor suddenly started playing Never Gonna Give You Up through its speakers. Did you just rickroll my ancestral battle armor?" "All part of the plan," Elena declared proudly. "Well, That and I really wanted to see if I could make a 300-year-old warrior dab. Mr. Snuggles, initialize protocol party time. The hamster pressed a tiny button, and suddenly every piece of Elena's master plan activated simultaneously. The rubber chickens formed a perfect circle, their squeaks harmonizing with the resonance frequency. The party balloons released their glitter in a synchronized explosion of sparkles. The silly string began conducting electrical charges in precise patterns. In the diplomatic box, the observers had given up on taking notes and were simply watching in awe. "She turned combat into performance art," Martinez whispered. "No," Watson replied, finally understanding. "She turned performance art into combat." Down in the arena, Vexithor's legendary armor was now completely under the control of Elena's chaos machine. The mighty general found himself performing a perfect routine from Swan Lake. "You know what your problem is?" Elena asked, casually dodging the last desperate swings of his weapons. "You spent 3 centuries learning every combat move in the galaxy, but you never learned to dance." "This is madness," Vexithor protested, as his armor pirouetted. "Madness! This is physics!" Elena shouted, giving Mr. Snuggles the signal for the final movement. The hamster, standing atop his DJ booth like a tiny maestro, brought all the elements together in one grand finale. The sound waves, the glitter patterns, the silly string circuits, and even the rubber chicken harmonics combined into a single point of perfect chaos. Vexithor's combat computer, faced with calculating the incalculable, did the only logical thing it could do. It crashed. The mighty general of the Kazarthax Empire, still performing ballet moves, watched in horror as his armor's systems shut down one by one. "And now," Elena announced to the stunned audience, "for my final trick, I will demonstrate why you should never underestimate a human with a physics degree and a hamster with a flair for dramatic timing." She pulled out her rubber chicken one last time, aimed it at the convergence point of all her chaos, and squeezed. Squeak! The sound wave, amplified by every carefully placed element in the arena, hit Vexithor's armor at exactly the right frequency. There was a flash of light, a burst of glitter, and a sound like the universe itself laughing. When the sparkles settled, the mighty general was lying on his back, his armor covered in silly string and stickers, while Mr. Snuggles stood triumphantly on his chest holding a tiny victory flag. Did your hamster just defeat me?" Vexithor asked in disbelief. "Technically, you were defeated by a combination of quantum physics, interpretive dance, and the power of friendship," Elena replied, helping him up. "But yeah, Mr. Snuggles did most of the work. He's really good at multivariable calculus." The arena erupted in cheers, confusion, and what sounded like several physics professors having existential crises. Humanity had won, not through strength or traditional combat skill, but through the strategic application of absolute chaos. And somewhere in the cosmic dance of probability, the universe smiled, because sometimes the best way to win a fight is to turn it into a party. The victory celebration in the Europa arena looked less like a traditional military ceremony and more like what would happen if a physics convention crashed into a carnival while a rave was in progress. Elena stood on the winner's podium, which she had somehow converted into a combination disco floor and lecture platform. Mr. Snuggles sat on her shoulder, tiny medal gleaming on his combat vest, still conducting the occasional chaos symphony with his baton. "And that's why you should never fight a human who understands both quantum mechanics and interpretive dance," Admiral Chen concluded his official speech to the assembled galactic representatives. "Now I believe Lieutenant Rodriguez has a few words." "Thanks, Admiral." Elena bounced up to the podium. "First off, I'd like to thank the Academy—" Wait, wrong speech. "Oh, I'd like to thank physics, chaos theory, and whoever invented silly string. Also, Mr. Snuggles would like to announce his new position as Earth's Secretary of Tactical Chaos." The hamster squeaked and pulled out a tiny business card. In the audience, Vexithor sat in his glitter-covered armor, still trying to process how exactly he'd lost. His combat computer was now playing a continuous loop of La Macarena and occasionally making his armor do jazz hands. "You know," Elena continued, "this whole experience has taught us all something important. Combat isn't just about who has the biggest weapons or the most training. Sometimes it's about who can turn their opponent's predictability into an impromptu dance number. The Kazarthax delegation, still covered in glitter from the final explosion, nodded sagely. Several of them had already signed up for Elena's upcoming seminar, Quantum Combat, When Physics Meets Interpretive Dance. As a gesture of peace, Elena announced, I'll be teaching a special class on combining traditional combat moves with earth dance styles. Also, Mr. Snuggles has agreed to give lectures on advanced chaos mathematics, but only on Tuesdays because that's his salsa night. Director Watson leaned toward Martinez. Should we be concerned that she's essentially teaching our former enemies how to weaponize chaos? Have you seen their attempts to do the chicken dance? I think we're safe. Indeed, the mighty Kazarthax warriors were now struggling to master the hokey-pokey under Mr. Snuggles' strict supervision. The hamster had proven to be a surprisingly demanding dance instructor. As my first act as Earth's champion, Eleanor continued, I propose we establish an annual galaxy-wide dance battle to replace traditional combat. Mr. Snuggles will head the judging committee, provided it doesn't conflict with his new reality show. The hamster pulled out a pair of tiny sunglasses and struck a pose. Additionally, Eleanor grinned, General Vexthor has agreed to join my upcoming tour, Physics Phenomena, When Warriors Learn to Break Dance. The general, who had finally given up fighting his armor's new musical preferences, managed a small wave. He'd discovered he had a natural talent for pop and lock moves, though he'd die before admitting it. The Kazarthax Empire officially recognizes this victory, announced their High Commander, who was still trying to get glitter out of his ceremonial robes, and requests immediate access to this silly string technology for peaceful purposes. Oh, that reminds me, Elena pulled out her rubber chicken. Who wants to learn about the relationship between string theory and comedy props? Several distinguished alien scientists raised their appendages eagerly. In the following months, the galaxy witnessed some strange changes. The Kazarthax Military Academy added creative chaos strategy to their curriculum. Mr. Snuggles became a celebrated lecturer on quantum probability at several prestigious universities. Eleanor's combat suit design, complete with built-in disco ball, became the standard for Earth's defense forces. Tactical dance theory emerged as a new field of military science. The rubber chicken was classified as a Class A military asset, but perhaps the most significant change was in how the galaxy viewed humanity. They weren't just the species that had defeated the mighty Vexithor, they were the species crazy enough to do it with physics, dance moves, and a hamster. You know what the best part is? Eleanor said to Mr. Snuggles as they watched the celebration. Nobody's noticed yet that we've actually been teaching them all the dance moves to summon an interdimensional party. The hamster squeaked knowingly and adjusted his tiny sunglasses. Somewhere in the vast expanse of space, the universe chuckled. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly how Eleanor liked it. After all, chaos was just order waiting for the right dance moves, and Mr. Snuggles hadn't even shown them his final form yet.